What's up, wrestling fans, trading card collectors? Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Cards. Today we've got Graeme Reed on the show. I followed him for a while on Instagram. He goes by the name Wrestling Card Wizard, and I'm sure there are a few of you out there watching this that have also ran into him there as well. But he's a relatively newer collector, and he's got a lot of awesome stories about his hobby journey so far. We talk about the stuff that he collects and the stuff he's into, his philosophy on things, as well as an interesting tie-in between wrestling, the cards that we collect, and magic? That's right, wrestling fans, we have a professional magician on the show today. And what really spawned the idea for me to get Graeme on the show today is an appearance he did on the Sports Card Therapist podcast with Rob Gerard. Rob's been on this channel before. You can go find his interview in the archives. Rob's also been on an episode of the Worlds Collide podcast. I believe it was a roundtable episode. This video today with Graeme is a little bit of a longer video, so I understand if you need to kind of pause it, break it up, watch it in pieces, whatever it is you got to do. But there were just so many great talking points and kind of things that maybe a lot of people don't talk about within the wrestling card space that I thought, hey, we're recording, let's just keep going, let's keep talking for the viewers. And I know there's some people out there like, oh, Zhan, oh, whoever, whatever content creator, just talk about the cards, I don't care about anything else. I don't care about the person, I don't care about the stories, I just want to hear about the cards, bro. Well, I'm sorry, but when I have an opportunity to kind of chat it up with some fellow collectors or people that I think have interesting takes or opinions or really bright minds for the hobby, then we got to talk about it. And if it goes long, it goes long. If it's talking about non-card stuff, then okay. But I like to find out about what goes on mentally from the collector perspective, especially from people who have a different outlook on things or collect different ways or different things. But we've got a ton to get into. Like I said, this is a longer episode, so without any further wait, let's jump into the conversation with the wrestling card wizard, Graeme Reed. What's up, wrestling fans? Another great guest today that maybe a lot of you aren't as familiar with. You may have seen him floating around on Instagram, but anybody I see that's promoting wrestling cards on any kind of platform, we have a lot to talk about today, but I've got to get him on the show. So, Graeme, welcome to the show.
Zhan, thank you so much for having me. My name is Graeme, but if you've seen me on social media, you might know me as the wrestling card wizard, Shazam.
Yep, there you go. And is it a gimmick name, or is this actually what you're going by, like in real life when you're like, oh, who are you? What do you do? And you give them that name. I collect wrestling cards.
Oh, okay. So the wrestling card wizard is strictly for the wrestling card community and the PC. That would be the wrestling card brand, I would say. Outside of that, I go by Gramazing. That's
an even better name. I'm sorry.
Right.
That's
sure.
great.
So and it actually comes from a weird place too, like where I'm from, Southern Ontario. There happens to be a lot of magicians that, first of all, there happens to be a lot of magicians. Secondly, there happens to be a lot of magicians with gimmick names. So I start like a Christerius and Alex Kazam. So like Graeme doesn't flow easily into something, but someone coined it off to me, Gramazing, and I've been calling myself Gramazing ever since. And I go by the level 7 wizard, and that's my stupid shtick for performing magic virtually or corporate events and things like that.
I'm sure we're going to weave magic in with pro wrestling, but and I'm sure this isn't the first time somebody's asked you about the wrestler Fantasio, or that was in WWE for like one match or something like that.
This is the first time. I've been waiting for someone to ask about
it. Yeah. I love weird wrestling history. Like, I saw him pop up there, and then he was in Memphis wrestling for a little bit, and I just loved it. So what's your take on that real quick?
So I have a question for you. Do you know, does he have a card?
I don't think so. Not unless there's a customer independent that I haven't seen. And he's wrestled for other promotions too, so you'd think thered be something out there about him, but I've never seen one.
The unique thing about Fantasio is the name, because you saw him, he would come out and produce like, canes and wands and do the throw streamer thing and like pretty gimmicky magic tricks at the time for the early 90s. Fantasio is actually the name of the manufacturer for the appearing candles and canes. So
they had to just steal that then, you think?
Oh yeah, they spelt it different with like PH instead of an F. But Fantasio, as people know in the magic community, produces those props, the appearing candles or appearing canes. If you ever seen like Las Vegas magicians or early magicians on, Late Night with Johnny Carson or something like that. That's where kind of that name comes from, which is so weird that they kind of mesh that right into, we'll just call you the gimmick name.
I bet you anything, now that I'm thinking about it, which is great information, by the way, but Bruce Pritchard's probably sitting there after they pulled this out of the box of gimmicks. Like, what do we call this guy? I don't know. What does it say on the side of this product that we just bought? Oh, that's his name. We're going with it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Didn't he say on the podcast too, I think, that they got rid of him because he like lit him on fire backstage with some flash paper or something?
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Okay,
That started
good.
a fire backstage. Yep. So
Awesome.
before we get too off the deep end on this, again, there's a lot of podcasts out there, and there's a lot of community people that just want to like, oh, talk about the cards. That's all we want to hear about. No, we're going to hear about the background of the collector, their story, who they are as a person, and kind of work our way through that. So for anybody that is unfamiliar, we've talked a little bit already about you, but just kind of give everybody a background of you as a person, introduction piece, and then how you got into wrestling and wrestling cards.
So me, I guess like currently right now, I perform as a magician part-time on the side. I do corporate branding full-time, which gives me a cool remote job. And then because of both of those things, I have the ability to partake in wrestling cards in the wrestling card community and collect unique and fun things. How wrestling for me has always been like part of the family. I think a lot, I don't know if everyone, maybe a lot of us have this experience, like you grow up with it, like your dad's watching it, your grandpa's watching it. You get together with your cousins, the entire family's watching it. My family would even have like Royal Rumbles. You know, everyone has a spot. We all would draw numbers and everyone has a spot and you call it in the ring.
That's
And,
awesome.
you know, like the younger cousins always win or whatever, but it's fine. And we'd have them in the pool, we'd have them in the basement and everything like that. And even when I call my dad still today and I bring up wrestling, he's like, he's always had the same attitude towards it. Like, oh, I'm not really following that anymore. And then I'll be like, so did you see what Cody Rhodes did last night? And then he'll be like, yeah, did you see that promo? And he'll recite it back word for word. I'm like,
so one of those people, huh?
Yeah, one of those guys. So I guess he's afraid to reveal that. But I also grew up in just outside of Hamilton, Ontario, which is kind of like a unique spot in the wrestling world. Like Angela Mosca is from here. He actually went to the same barbershop that I went to growing up. So there's autographed pictures all around. My background professionally is TV broadcasting. So I worked at CHCH Television, which actually would help broadcast like Maple Leaf Wrestling early in the days. And it's kind of so that TV station went through a lot of different changes and things. But I worked with one of the cameramen that had been there since like he started, like his father worked at the station. So he was a cameraman when he was too young to work and kind of has always been a cameraman. So he was a ringside cameraman for some of that Canadian wrestling that would happen from Brantford or Cops Coliseum or in Toronto or what they'd call the Telecenter in Hamilton. And he gave me his ringside crew.
Oh my, that's so cool.
The onesie, right? Like the coveralls that say WWF crew.
Yep.
He gave me a hat. It's a Hulkamania hat. It still has the 1985 tag on it and everything. So he gave me some of these cool relics. So there's just always been like in Hamilton a strong community of wrestling, and then I now live in Brantford, which is the same thing. Like there's some huge stories that come from wrestling history right here in Brantford. Like the formation of the Hart Foundation was right here in my backyard, kind of thing.
That's cool.
So all these cool sorts of stories. When it comes to collecting, it's always been in the family. Like I remember going to the comic book store with my brothers. I have two older brothers, so they kind of would influence what I would collect a little bit. So my brother was into trading cards. So I remember originally collecting like, you know, the 1991 wrestling card set. I think would probably be the first memory of a card set that I have. I have it in a binder somewhere. They're not in any good shape, but you know, it's got like the Undertaker.
Some of that stuff is best in binders because you just flip through it and it's just, that's what it's all about.
Well, and then you remember like how you organized it and mixed in there is like Marvel and X-Men cards, you know, and things like that. And I've created magic tricks from those memories too.
That's cool.
And then I've been able to, since in taking part in the wrestling card community and getting even more immersed in sports card trading and everything. Because when I was a kid, it was more just fun and games, like trading pogs in the park, you know, that kind of stuff.
I did the same thing, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So now it's more serious. So now I can actually enhance my scripts and pattern. And when I'm presenting magic and I'm talking about my now passion about wrestling cards or sports card collecting, Pokemon collecting, anything like that, there's someone always in the room, 2 people, 3 people that are shy to talk about it because they don't know how. So how do you bring this up in a group of people at random? And now they can talk about it. So now we're talking about riffing on something else in the room during the magic show. So it's opened up like another realm too. But yeah, collecting, I have like a really small stack of strange comics, like Alf comics and things. But my favorite things have always been magic and pro wrestling. I think my whole life is make believe.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, let's just jump off from that point. I constantly, you know, people don't like to talk about wrestling because, like you said, I mean, you've given multiple examples now about how people are like embarrassed to talk about it or shy to talk about it. And I think I've always said, like, it's fake. I'm like, I don't care. This is, and I'm, quote me if I'm wrong. I'm like, this is like watching my magic show. I don't want to know how they do anything. I don't want to know the ins and outs, really. I just want to like it for what it is, get immersed in what's going on in front of me, and just like suspend disbelief. I just want to be part of it. So thoughts?
So for Magic and pro wrestling are in that same realm of, like, you get the same remark that when you say I watch wrestling, people go, "Do you know that's fake? Do you want to see a magic trick? Magic's not real." And you kind of go, "Well, you're missing the point. Neither movies aren't real. Nothing's real. Like, if we look at it, nothing's really real. It's all scripted."
Correct.
But you're never questioning it.
Right.
Wrestling and Magic pose these questions of bending what's real or not, which is still exciting. And it's exciting to see wrestling do that in a modern day environment, right? With social media where there's dirt sheets and people talking about theories and everything like this. And you still get surprised and excited by wrestling. And I don't know, I still don't there's still a lot of magic in wrestling too.
Yeah.
How they do what they do in the ring, how they communicate and everything. I know you hear things on podcasts, but still when you watch it on TV, you're like, these guys are crazy professional at what they're doing when you think about what they're doing.
Yeah. And then like on the podcast, so they actually working you like, right. It's this weird blend of like what's real, what's not. It's real life. It's on Sports Center sometimes, but it's in dirt sheets, and like you just don't know. And that I don't care what anybody says about, oh, it's all been exposed. Like, yeah, but to what level? Like maybe it was part of it was purposely exposed for you to not know and know. It's weird, wild.
And there's always people too that have a satisfying answer that, like, I know how it works. It's fine. It's cool. Like same with Magic. Yeah. People think that I know how that trick works. I know exactly what's going on here. I still hear about, I had friends' dads growing up like, oh, I remember seeing the chair and it had the blood bag on the back. How does that even work? How does that operate? I don't know. How does that happen?
No idea why you just reminded me of this, but it's a good like parallel. Vegas Vacation, the movie where they pull him up there and he's like, I know a little magic myself, and he does the thumb trick, and I'm just like, and then he's like blown away. Like that is what you just said, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's basically the exact same thing. And yeah, I mean, there's always those people. And I think if you can get those people that are rough and you go, here, come watch some wrestling, and they get excited by maybe what's going on right now because it's incredible storytelling. Or when you see a really good magic trick, because a lot of people have a perception of what magic is. And then you share like, no, let me actually show you what magic is. I'll show you a real deal trick for a second. And then they go, I didn't actually know it was that good.
Yeah.
And then people start to appreciate it. And maybe people dive in more, either becoming fans or both both Magic and wrestling allow a deeper dive, right? You can dive into podcasts and wrestling and learn behind the scenes, right? Like learning terms like elephant door from Jeff Jarrett and things like that, right? Like carnival things, which is super fun. Or you start to learn like, words like kayfabe and things like that. And that word is even transferred into Magic too. There's a whole DVD set you can get called kayfabe.
Oh,
and it's
cool.
The art of protecting the magic secret. Like how committed are you to that in your magic, right? And that's when you, as a magician, and maybe similar to a wrestler, even a collector, right? You're setting rules for who am I, what is my character, like how deep am I going with this,
right?
How real and how far do I want to go?
Man, there was way more parallels than I even imagined as I started talking about this.
There's a lot there.
Yeah, unbelievable. All right, so let's start talking about how you got into wrestling cards specifically. How does that, like, what are you collecting today? Like, I feel like your interest from just kind of viewing what you post is more of the ultra modern stuff, and I feel like we've had a huge boom in that recently. So talk about how you got into it, PC, anywhere you want to go with that.
So I would say I got heavily into wrestling card collecting, and it would basically be like exactly a year ago now.
Okay.
Which is unique. So like I'm a newer, intense wrestling card collector. And how I got introduced, it might be common to a lot of people too that are in wrestling cards, is from the Card Foundation podcast. That was that was the entry level drug, right? From listening to obviously like Matt and Brian and their figure podcast.
And that's what I was going to ask you, like, how did you go down the avenue of even finding Card Foundation? Because I feel like that's not something that just pops up on your podcast feed. You got to dig for some of this stuff.
So it was, I've been listening to Major Wrestling Figure podcast since the first episode, but I was more listening to it because I like to hear the road wrestling stories and all that stuff. The collecting part was really cool. And then I started a small figure collection when Roman Reigns came out about leukemia.
Okay.
And that was for me. For me, I was itchy enough to buy figures, but I needed like a justification, I guess.
Right.
I was like, good one, I got it. So then I made weird rules for wrestling figures, so I didn't go like crazy and get too many. And it would be things like I had to really appreciate the wrestler. It wouldn't just be any figure, like just a really cool figure. For some reason, the wrestler had to have complete pants, because if I was going to showcase a wrestler on my shelf, I'd want complete pants or something.
These are some interesting rules, but I like it.
Right. So
like focus.
develop your rules, develop your boundaries, right? So anyhow, I did that, and then I kind of didn't want to collect it because it takes up a lot of space.
Yeah,
it takes up a lot of space.
That's why I got out of them.
Sure.
So I got one behind me, and that's it.
Yeah, I only have a few. There's the John Cena over here is actually a magic wand I use in my show.
That's awesome.
Right. So I do a trick called the John Cena, and I ask people, I was like, do you know what the magic spell is? And some people do. If you get the right age and like, you can't see me, nailed it. So I put the John Cena in their back pocket, and they make a card vanish from their hands, and it appears under the seat they were sitting in the audience.
That's so cool.
That's the John Cena. And I say that's like taught at level 6 wizard school or whatever. It's a whole thing.
That's awesome. So anyway, we could do like, are you still doing your podcast?
No, Magic Podcast has died off, so over for a while now. But so anyhow, I fell out of the wrestling figure. Like I didn't want to accumulate any more wrestling figures, right? And then you get introduced to the Card Foundation podcast through
the Major Figure,
and then you start to listen to it, and the excitement, I think, about the wrestling cards got really exciting to me. And I'd already dabbled in getting some blasters here and there before listening to the podcast again. Like, oh, I don't know, it's kind of cool that you might get an autograph in that box. That's really cool. And then listening to the podcast, and this was like Topps era, right before the Panini. So the excitement for me was the on-card autograph. I think it would be really amazing that from a Walmart blaster, you can grab a card that the wrestler interacted with.
Right.
And that got really exciting. And that's when I started getting itchy and opened too many cards, right? And started collecting. And then I started to try to figure out what is the rules that I'm trying to set in this collection here.
Sure.
Without losing my mind. And it was first based on autographs, starting like an autograph collection. Like I want to kind of get the best autographs and kind of get most of my favorite people. And when you achieve that, then you're like, well, what's next? What do I do next? And then everyone was talking about player PCs, like yourself and Tony and everybody, and that sounded really exciting. And I think Sports Card Therapist talked about a tree. So I created the rule of like 2 current, 1 legend, 2 current, 1 legend. And then like, who do I gravitate towards? Who is my favorite that I watch right now? And so I settled on like Bianca Belair and Montez Ford, because I think they're 2 of the best, 2 of them, like they're superstars right now already. It's odd that a lot of people don't really talk about them too much in their career. It's kind of like everyone's like, yeah, they're superstars, we get it. But what about all these other people that are doing great things? And like I think they still have a lot more to go. Montez Ford, I think last night on Raw, he's going to go to the Elimination Chamber as a single, right? So they're starting to change up his storytelling. Bianca Belair, though, has some of the best WrestleMania moments when we talk about modern WrestleManias. And there's going to be a new generation of people that start talking wrestling chatter on podcasts. And I think that Bianca Belair, Sasha Banks will be like the boyhood dream, but like the modern day version of it. Because that's like, if that match start to finish, there's so much emotion there.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. It's really, because especially when it happens and all this. So Bianca Belair, Montez Ford, and then the legend that I chose in my PC tree is Jerry the King Lawler.
Amazing, like
right, and it kind of goes back to, he's like a magician in the ring. Yeah, he uses a lot of magic tactics, from flash paper to, there's the story of him in the shark cage above the ring, right? He's placed, and he gets the nosebleed because of the height. So he's like smart enough to like nick his nose and create that story, right? These additional pieces, the Andy Kaufman scenario that he had. And did you watch Tales from the Territory?
Yeah. Yep. It's a great series.
Unbelievable how he even revealed more information about that. In that, like, there's even more stories to be told. He's still hiding secrets and protecting things.
Yep.
So there's a huge magician quality to Jerry the King Lawler. And a big thing about the way I do my magic, I make it really versatile. Like, there's this idea in magic that, well, I could know 30 tricks, but if I learned 6, I could be really great. And I think Jerry the King Lawler has done like an amazing long career with a simple moveset, not hurting and damaging his body, right? But going the distance and being who he is. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's old school wrestling. Like, that's how those guys were able to wrestle every single night, because they put, I mean, this isn't a wrestling podcast, but they put so much effort into getting the audience storytelling, and less is more. And
Right.
I think that's why I like old wrestling so much better, because I get more, like, everything that people are saying with Roman and Sammy right now in this story was like an average Tuesday in the middle of the 80s. You know what I mean?
True.
So like,
True.
and I'm hoping that the more myself, you, anybody else can talk about wrestling history to make someone go back and dig through territory era wrestling, maybe just a little bit more perspective, and then maybe they start collecting those cards because that's what they liked. So from a PC standpoint, like I said, I feel like you go for more of the ultra modern, where obviously with Bianca or Montez, you're going with modern because that's what they have. So for Jerry the King Lawler, like, are you dabbling in vintage? Are you mainly saying that, I want to take advantage of these Panini opportunities because they are putting these territory legends in their products? Now, where are you going with all this? Are you these three names? So we've established the guidelines for these three. Are you super collecting them? Or are you just going after top tier stuff? Like, how are you approaching your collection when it comes to this?
You're so good at questions.
I try.
So I think, I mean, these are the questions that I'm always asking too about, like, what am I doing with this? And I think I'm pretty sporadic, and I'm not a super collector. I'm not getting, maybe necessarily every important card that everyone would say is all the important cards. As I scan through eBay, or I see a Facebook sale or something on Twitter or wherever you happen to find cards, right?
Sure.
If I see something that, like, that card is really cool, I'm going to add that to the collection. I think I'm going to add that to the collection. When it comes to looking at modern cards, I'm always looking at numbered cards because it makes it feel like it's more important in a way. But I've also been going through, this is a strange exercise, and maybe this is an eye-opening thing to people too, but take like the number card in one hand and the base card in one hand and hold them up to each other. And how do, like, make, if you like take one away, how does it make you feel? If you
Right.
take this one away, how does it make you feel? Does the base, so what does that mean? So so I've been figuring that out, but I feel like I'm still collecting like specific cards. So like a Jerry the King Lawler, I'll try to get an out of 10 gold card or something like that.
Gotcha.
Something kind of flashy and nice and modern. I'll try to go for the color match, which is cool with Jerry, because like get a blue or a red or something in there. It looks really sharp. Same with Montez or Bianca. With Bianca, I'm more super collecting autographs, I think, and kind of the relics. But as I learn more, like as people talk more about relics on podcasts, I get more like, how meaningless are these? I'm not sure. But then I go back to, well, if it's important to me, that's fine.
Right.
So that's okay. I don't know how you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
so I would say that's what I'm gravitating towards. But outside of the main PC, so mainly autographs, I would say is the main thing that I'm looking at. Autographs and the numbered cards, lower numbered cards. I kind of go everywhere. And I've started this year to kind of go for a complete set. I do have complete sets of most of these modern sets too, because I do like to rip open too many cards. But the one I'm going for is I have one here, the 1995 magazine cards.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a nice throwback.
Well, starting in 1995, right? Isn't that when they start, I think?
Yeah.
So, and this is the Owen Hart. This is a PSA.
I think they went through like 98, maybe.
I think 98,
like
but
97,
I think
98.
Yeah, but 97, 98, the cards become more of like throwbacks, I think, or
Yeah.
highlighting moments and things. But that said, I remember really specific as a kid, I'd go across the street and my friend had the magazines and he had the cards, and they're poorly ripped out of the magazine, but he also had a pog creator, so he'd make pogs with the cards too.
Oh my gosh.
So like it's so deep with that stuff. So I managed to grab some of those cards at a local card show, and I can't stop looking and reading them. So I decided I'm going to dive into that whole set this year. If
that's something you continue to go back to, I think that's probably a pretty good move.
Right. And I feel like too, I mean, from a collecting standpoint, I think that's going to become an important set as wrestling as wrestling moves on, and Attitude Era, and this just pre-Attitude Era becomes more popular. It's just so popular.
Well, and more collectors too. Like,
yeah,
like you coming in talking about this magazine set and what impact it has on you, which I think it's a great set, and I understand what you're talking about. But if you want to introduce wrestling cards to people, most of the time they're not thinking about this. They're thinking about Prism or 82, 83 All-Stars or 85 Top, like these big flagship things that have these high prices and these big name cards. And you're like, well, actually, this is connecting with me more than that stuff. And I think the more of that we get in wrestling cards, the more this thing is just going to explode.
So I think for me, Prism, and I think probably for all wrestling collectors, has been an educational experience.
Yeah, sure.
On like how do we collect these cards now? Because in a way, a sticker autograph is not as exciting to
Right.
the wrestling card collector. And I think it goes down to, well, they didn't interact with this card as much. I
Right.
guess to me, that's my perspective on it. So then when you look at Prism and you start to hear like other people's perspectives, like Brett and Stacking Slabs or Drake's PC, because I don't collect other sports cards. I actually know
Hmm.
nothing about sports at all. Just magic and wrestling over here. It gives you the education of like what people are collecting in Prism outside in other sports,
Yeah.
but it still appears that wrestling is still choosing what cards they want to collect, and it's different, and I think that's exciting too. And it goes back to, well, choosing the right colors, choosing, maybe I want to collect all the out of 49s in this set. There's a lot of possibility. Prism gives you lots of possibilities in different ways you want to collect, and I think that's where you got to create. It goes back to creating some rules and boundaries for yourself of like, what am I collecting all the out of 10s on this? Am I doing set collecting? Am I doing out of 49s? Am I just going to collect cool players? I think right now for me, I'm kind of more just dabbling in a lot of cool players because I do have the tree, right? So I
Hmm.
mean, on the other levels, there's, like Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, Bret Hart, Hulk Hogan, all these things too in there. So you see all these, you're always adding these cards to the PC too.
Yeah, that's great perspective. And the like new collectors coming in, it's kind of two things I've noticed. Number one, with Panini products, it has opened I think it's opened the mindset of collectors. Like, you can collect this way, you can collect that way, you can put this color match set together, you can collect the bloodline in whatever kind of parallel you want. There's all these different ways you can collect, and Panini has given collectors the opportunity to do that, in which case I don't think Topps really cared in the past. Panini's doing Logo Man, relics.
Right.
Topps didn't care about that kind of stuff. So that's a positive. But you bring up another interesting point that I might include myself in this, maybe not. I don't know. When you look at what's happening in sports cards and what works and what doesn't, and then you see those licenses transition into wrestling, you're like, okay, well, we need to educate the wrestling community on what's important, what's not, maybe what is and isn't kind of borderline there. And a lot of it has continued: golds, blacks, one of ones, all that stuff, rainbows, color matching, all that stuff. It has definitely, like, the wrestling card community has grasped it. But then, like you said, there's still these, like, autographs still seem to be more important to people in certain segments of the hobby than other things. And then the whole rookie card debate, like, even though we have these definitions by Beckett of what is and isn't, wrestling card collectors are like, we don't care, we're going to gravitate to whatever we feel like it is. So it's been interesting now that we're over a year into this new Panini cycle. The kind of old school collectors, what they have and haven't adapted to, whether that's positive or negative, and then the new collectors, what they have adapted to, coming in from either sports cards or coming in like you as a new collector and trying to, yeah, when you're coming in, you don't really have a bias to anything. You're just like trying to absorb everything and then picking which way you want to go. So as somebody who's been doing it for a couple of years, it's definitely interesting to see all of the changes that have happened.
It's really, and I mean, everyone's always talking about how unique the wrestling card community is. And I
Yeah,
think
let's
that,
just go ahead and jump to that then as you're talking about it.
so, well, it's kind of like it parallels to all this, right? Because it's
Yeah.
um, as we see this whole educational period of Panini and wrestling card collectors, and we do hear a lot of perspectives on podcasts from the same kind of parties and people and things like that. And we get kind of similar viewpoints. And I feel like there's always kind of questions coming up. Like, it's surprising that wrestling card collectors collect this over this, or why are wrestling card collectors doing what the football collector people do and things like that.
Hmm.
And I think it comes down to, there's probably a lot more wrestling card collector people like me that are not into sports, love pro wrestling. It's like our man soap opera, well, not that's a
I know
modern
what
day
you mean. That's
it's
fine.
a modern day soap opera, right?
Yeah,
It lets adults be kids. It lets us continue to be
absolutely. Yeah.
kids. Um, and I think when it comes to like trading cards, I mentioned this before too on Sports Card Therapist. You have a lot more opportunity to collect a lot of players in
Yeah.
wrestling because there's not as many. I mean, in sports, like there's so many athletes coming out, there's so much prospecting and everything going on. When in wrestling, like you can just collect a bunch of different players, and it's kind of easy to do a little bit of prospecting in wrestling because it's kind of easy to see who's a superstar on TV, who's on TV the
Right.
most often. Unfortunate situations like a Velveteen Dream happen or
Right.
whatever, but I mean that's kind of like celebrities. We're dealing with celebrities, I think, when we're collecting wrestling cards, like superstar athletes, whereas sports, it's a different realm of thing. I also think like the photography on a wrestling card is way more exciting and exhilarating than there's only so many poses you can get out of a football or a baseball or
Yeah.
a soccer card. And I think wrestling gives you a lot more opportunities there too for the photography. And I think, in Chronicles right now, photography is really driving the collecting on that
That and
one
the
for sure.
styles of the sets. Yeah. Chronicles has
Yeah.
been a pretty big hit too.
Yeah.
Um, Something else that you mentioned just then is like these. I don't understand why wrestling cards haven't picked up on it more because, Velveteen Dream, and you can maybe pick one or two others, but for the most part, even your low tier talent in wrestling, like those cards may still be sought after years down the road, as opposed to traditional sports cards where you maybe, whether it's prospecting or whether it's maybe the new rookie on your favorite team, like you go after those cards and then literally a year and a half to 2 years they may be cut and never to see the light of day again. That rarely happens in wrestling because of indies. Like you could take that, what if it is that WWE guy that got cut, he has the Prism card, you can take the Prism card to your local indie show that he shows up at, interact with him, have him sign it. You're just not going to get that a lot in sports cards. And I don't know, as much as I love the idea of what they do in sports cards and how well it works in wrestling as well with some of these new brands that we have, I still question, like, are they not wrestling fans? Is that just why we haven't seen more of this in wrestling cards, that they're just sports fans? And it's kind of, circling back to what you talked about. Maybe they were as a child and they're embarrassed to talk about it as an adult. But it's something interesting that people go after Pokemon or these weird non-sport cards from their favorite shows, but it seems like they're not doing that with wrestling, except for us wrestling fans.
I wonder if it's the exposure of wrestling cards. I mean, it's still increasing and growing, and there's been a ton of exposure just even in this past year of people talking, sharing, communicating about wrestling cards, I think.
Right.
So when I first got into it as Card Foundation podcast, then I found you, right? And then Worlds Collide and everything that you guys were doing. And I'm pretty sure I looped all the podcasts. Like I'm just going to keep
Thank you
listening
for
to
that.
these. Yeah. Because I was like, there needs to be more information. And then I start listening to more sports card podcasts, but like, I'm not thinking about the heavy investment.
Yeah, we're going to
thing.
touch on that in just a little bit.
So then, but you start to like hear wrestling card chatter on these kind of other sports card podcasts that have big followings and things, and you're like, oh, maybe it is growing. And then you start to see Gelman pop up on YouTube and everything.
Yep.
And it's kind of like you and Tony made a call to action about getting more content out there and sharing it. And I think it's happening, and it is helping expose the more people know about wrestling cards. Even when I go to the local card shows, like I've met the small community wrestling card guys now.
Even I went to a local card show November, December of last year, and I would ask, you got any wrestling? And it was either yeah, we've got some here, or no, I don't have any right now, but I usually carry it. It wasn't, in the past it had been like, wrestling, who collects wrestling? But it's not that way anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like all the local shops are like, it goes pretty quick, and when it goes on sale, it's gone. And they have plenty of boxes too. It's great. So I think it comes down to the more communication, more people getting excited about wrestling cards, talking about it openly. I know that people are shy about their things. I think we saw when I went to the Sports Card Expo in Toronto, there was a guy that had the Card Foundation podcast T-shirt, and he was sitting in the corner of the restaurant we were at, and we were like, Card Foundation podcast. And he was like, yeah. I was like, are you in the Patreon group? And he's like, no, I just listen on the outside. I'm just, you're like, all right, that's cool. You got a shirt. That's cool.
Yeah. And how's that been for you? Just, I think that's been a huge driving factor in people coming out of the woodwork and saying, yeah, I want to collect wrestling cards. This is who I collect. This is what I collect. Because social media, while there is some negative aspects to it, the positive have way more outweighed that based on, who do you collect? Here's a card. Here, start your PC. How is that community driven, whether it is Facebook groups, whether it's Instagram or Twitter, whatever it is, like how's that community experience been for you since you started?
Oh, I mean, it's like I think Michael Golden was on that Sports Card Therapist podcast episode I was on. He was talking about, he kind of nailed it, the uniqueness of what wrestling cards do for us as adults. As like, I think most of us are probably between 30 and 45 or somewhere in that ballpark, right? And it recreates the playground experience that we had as kids, where you have friendships just based on entertainment and fun, but the pressures of life never come up or anything like that. And there's just this active childhood trading that goes on. It's very much like when you play Pogs on the playground as a kid. You know, you bring in your stack of Pogs. Because I don't remember trading cards on the playground. I remember playing Pogs though a lot.
I did both, so I know
I
what
was
you
a
mean
little
on both.
Pog hustler. I still have my
Yeah.
Pog binder too and everything.
That's so
I have
cool.
all my Pogs. But I remember you take like your stack and you play and you're doing all this trade. And it's like an unbelievable amount of fun. And you create this community of, you know, kids playing Pogs and stuff. And it's the same with wrestling cards. You have small communities, and there you're right. There's a mix of communities online. Like I have Instagram friends and things like that. I did sell a little bit on Whatnot. I have a bunch of cool friends from that I don't really do the Whatnot thing anymore, but a bunch of cool friends that still talk wrestling cards like every single day. Just local buddies that I talk to all the time about wrestling cards too. I mean, like Gordo and Jason and Greg, these guys are really cool. And it's cool just to like break up the day and go,
Yeah.
hey, what'd you pick up today? What are you, or they tag you in something, right? The best thing is when you get tagged in like a Bianca or a Montez card, or you see someone like a card for someone else and you're like, oh, they're thinking about me. That's really cool. Like it feels really special. So I think the wrestling card community as a whole has been like that. There's none of this weird, I don't even know what people are talking about on podcasts about the negative sports card because I'm not in it. So
You're
like
not
I
in
don't
it,
know
yeah.
about it. I don't know
Right.
about it. I guess I have like horse blinders up to the whole thing. My experience from it, because I pulled back from the magic world a little bit. I still perform, but I am not with the podcast. It became so consumed, and with magic, there's a ton of ego, right?
No,
Everyone's trying
same
to
with
like,
the cards. You just haven't experienced it probably
sure,
yet.
I haven't experienced it properly, but I've noticed in wrestling, like it doesn't feel like I've heard about it a little, I guess, like through the stories that you share and things. But from my experiences, it's more of like I that community environment that I want out of Magic, where we should be celebrating each other's collections, cheerleading each other.
Yep.
It's odd. I do it for a fellow magician, but like if this gig's not right for me, I know who it's right for. Use this magician.
Right.
Not everybody does that sort of thing. But in a wrestling card collection, you see something that's not right for me, but I know who it's right for. That's the
100%.
difference. That's the difference, I think.
All right, so you mentioned Whatnot. I want to touch on this real quick. What was and is that experience for you? And then something else I think that as you kind of tie that in with this question, it's kind of two questions in one that can be combined. The wrestling card community, people are gonna really hate me for this once again, but I've said the wrestling card community is a bunch of hoarders because they just buy stuff, and they never let stuff sell. And then sometimes they see something they want, but they don't use the equity that they built up in their own collection to sell those things to get that thing that they want that's either bigger, better, or is more meaningful to them. So as someone coming in with a fresh perspective, you sold on Whatnot, you're new to buying cards, but you're still building out a PC. How has Whatnot gone from just a platform perspective? How's that gone for you? Because it's done well for a lot of people, and then others it hasn't. And then how has funding your collection gone, and how do you function in that way?
Lots of layers to that dip right there.
Let's get
it. So I think I started Whatnot and eBay maybe about the same. I've always had done eBay stuff like a little bit, not a store level, just like here and there, right? And then so I started them maybe with the wrestling cards at the same time as like, how's this gonna go? And for me, Whatnot was really fun and exciting because I've done virtual magic shows, so I like to like perform on camera and entertain. I would do magic tricks during the Whatnot streams.
That's awesome.
Too, and things. The only problem is, and this is the international struggle, being a Canadian collector and dealing with Whatnot, shipping goes crazy, so people don't want to buy.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't really work out that well. But I built a small community of Canadian collectors, so but then you don't want to be on there all the time and just selling to the same three people. You don't, it doesn't feel right. So I kind of backed out of it because Whatnot appears to be maybe it's like a breakers community when it comes to cards, right? You need to be moving a lot of stuff. It's like you got to be on there all the time doing it, do a great job of really building an audience, and it helps to also be American for sure.
The shipping is something I did not even consider. Like
the Canadian shipping almost goes triple for some reason. So it's intense and it's like a huge hindrance. And that also makes it complicated to do trades within groups and things too, because I use ship my cards This podcast is not brought to you by Ship My Cards, but I use Ship. I use
I wish
Ship
it
My.
was. I ship to people who buy, like out of my eBay store. I would say once a day I get an order from somebody buying from that has a Ship My Cards address. So
Well, you've got quite. I think I've probably purchased from your eBay store, but you've got quite the amount of cards on there and
yep,
everything. And yeah, Ship My Cards allows like the international audience to easily do that, but then to trade those cards out is like, oh boy, you got
yeah,
to make it's a whole thing. So it's not as easy. So for me, I found eBay helps fund the collection. And I've been learning. I actually, question for you, I feel like I'd love to hear more eBay content on your podcast.
okay.
There's a request, I guess, more of a request.
Hey, I'm all up for doing it, especially if it helps other people. But there's so many people in wrestling cards that are just like, talk about the cards. I don't want to hear about money. And I'm just
Well,
like,
maybe not. I think it's more about the store experience. Like, how do you,
process.
right? So for me, I found like I've been learning, like, oh, you know what? If I actually just take like a batch of cards and then I have them so they all end around the same amount of time, treat it like almost like an auction house or something,
Hmm.
you're more likely to move a bunch of things. The strategies like that, eBay strategies on a future podcast from
I will
Zhan.
do it because you asked for it. I will do it.
There you go. So besides that, I think local card shows. I do when I go
Okay.
to a local card show. I learned about grab a stack of cards, pass them to a dealer, and work out trades, trade up, and that whole sort of thing. And that's actually really fun to do that.
I agree.
And then a small group of guys that we have too. We don't. What we tend to actually do. We're too nice. We just get cards for each other. We'll just see a card, we buy it, and we're like, here you go. Here you go.
I think that's the wrestling card community, though. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know about you, but a lot of times I'll just go to my PO box and there's a card, and it could be a base card, it could be an autograph, and it was like, here, I know you collect this. Here you go.
Mm-hmm. So I think that, and then I have a bunch of other collectibles that I've been flipping. So all my wrestling figures flipped into this, and various things like that. When I was video games, flipping video games and things like that. And then I do magic shows on the side.
It's a lot of, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
A lot of different ways to fund the PC. And honestly, like, I wish more people were kind of like that instead of complaining, like, I can't afford the card I want. Boo hoo, woe is me. I'm like, go out there and figure out how to do it, whether that's trading or, getting another job by, if it's a really high end card you're wanting, like whatever it is, like that's part of the fun to me, is the journey of getting to that collectible, because there are cards in my collection that I have no business owning. But if I wasn't buying, selling, trading, making the few gears that I do have in my brain, making those things, putting them to work, I wouldn't have the collection that I have. Instead of, I could have just been complaining about it. So that is awesome to hear, just all the different ways that you're going about doing this.
And there is unique ways to do trades too. Like some people might not think about the skills that they provide, right?
Right.
So I'm like a graphic artist. If I could use that if I wanted to, and I don't usually do that. I usually just flip people graphics and things like that. But for instance, I was at the Sports Card Expo sharing card magic like a ham that I am at the Upper Deck booth, and you end up with like a Chris Jericho autograph card, right? Like
that's so cool.
So, and it, like the national exclusive kind of thing, and that's just stuff like that. Unique opportunities can happen if you maybe like look at, well, what other skills can I maybe trade or play with here?
Yeah. As we transition into some content perspective, we got to start with the Jeff Wilson card. Like, first off, how does this happen? How do you run into him? How do you, and the fact that you're a wrestling card only guy that knows who Jeff Wilson is, and that kind of leads into our discussion on content. But how does this happen?
Well, I mean, so like I consume all sports card content, seeing what everyone's doing. I'll watch Jeff Wilson every now and then. I like watching the shows to see what's going on from the shows. I think that's where, like, sports card lessons, Ken Cairns gives you a great perspective of sports card shows from the dealer table. It's so cool. I think that's like, it's unique. That's why his is so unique. I'm not into I don't know who athletes are, so I don't know anything about the investment side of stuff, but I know who Jeff Wilson is, and I know he's got a lot of views, and I know he's got a camera crew following around him, and I know I'm a magician. So
got to make it work.
I mean, I'm at a card show. It only makes sense to bring cards with me too. I've performed at conventions before, like comic conventions and things like that. And it's a unique group of people. Most of us are introverted, unless you have a camera crew with you, right?
Right.
Because you'll see those at the bigger card shows now. There's always a camera crew people. But if a magic trick, like if I pull out a pack of cards, you can get a small group of people together and it kind of opens up. It's a good icebreaker.
Right.
But for me, I tried twice. I'm such a ham. So I tried twice. I saw him at one table, and it's actually in that video when he's doing the deal for the most expensive card.
Yep.
I had no idea what was going on. I'm standing like behind him with my cards, like riffling them, trying to like, I'm gonna do a trick here. I'm gonna do a trick here. And then I'm like, guy's busy. I'll come back later. And then I happen to see him later, and I go to, I don't, one of the guys. I go, do you think Jeff wants to see a magic trick? And he's like, I think for sure he does. So
That's
then
awesome.
he finished with the one guy. We waited, and then I did a couple tricks to him, but they cut everything down really fast. And
Right.
we managed to get Jason and Jason's son Isaiah in the video too. They're right behind us in the Raptors jerseys. But they were the crew, like the wrestling card crew that we went with. So it was really cool.
That's awesome. So that is kind of the icebreaker, since we were talking about that, into consuming content. And I've followed you on Instagram for a while, but then I saw you randomly pop up on Sports Card Therapist, and I was like, okay, first off, this is a unique group of guests. This is a unique topic. What is going on here? So, and it's an amazing show. And I heard you talking, and I'm like, there's so much that you were talking about specifically that you guys just didn't have time. Each of you did not have time to go in depth on it. So I was like, you got to come on the show, which here we are. So, let's talk about first content. I've been saying forever, not only do we need more wrestling card content of varying degrees, but people in the wrestling card space need to go consume other types of content, no matter what it is, because there's so much you can learn. Like, I listen to a real estate podcast, and there's stuff they're talking about there that I actually use on a regular basis with like $1.50 cards. Right. And I'm like, there's so many parallels between sports cards or businesses or mindset, like, these podcasts that just talk about how people think. There's all these things that you can take back to wrestling and use it to your advantage to get that collection you want, or make, I've not made a ton of money on wrestling cards because I like to keep a lot of them, but different ways that sports cards and all these other things approach things. It apparently works for you. You consume the content. Take that wherever you want.
That was so open.
Yeah, there's just like, because everybody has a different opinion on this, and I just think the wrestling card community is still kind of struggling to branch out and try these different things that are going to help them. Clearly, you're entertained and you're learning from them, but you don't collect sports. So I have in the past, and I still do collect sports cards. Mostly it's older stuff that I grew up with, but the philosophy is still there. And I did this years ago where I was like, oh, people like these gold prisms. Well, Topps has gold refractors. So I bought up some of those, and I've sold some since, but I still have some. And they're worth, like, some of them are worth more staying in my collection, but some of them were worth so much. I was like, well, this just funded some of my 82 All-Stars autographs that I got. So just that perspective, I just don't think people have gotten to that point yet. So I just love to hear how you got into all of this content that you don't collect.
Right. So it's so interesting. And I'm trying to figure out like a good answer here at the same time. And
there may not be one, but I just wanted to hear you talk about it.
Well, I think it goes down to like, maybe like a sense of, it's back to that boundaries, who are you, core values sort of thing, that deep kind of answer, that question that you ask. And if I look at the podcast that I listen to for hobby content, that's like, I'm really listening to it actively and engaged and like, thoughtful. Like Sports Card Therapist hits on that. You hit on that. You and Tony hit on that when you do the round tables with everybody. You touch on that. Stacking Slabs touches on that too. I listen to other things. Like, I'm not like a guy that's into like a let's go, come on, all this sort of stuff. Like, I find these podcasts, there's often more thoughtful questions going on. Like I'm always interested in the why we're doing things, right? Like, why. It's a big question that we ask in Magic. Why am I up here with a pack of cards, shuffling them for you? How are we even here? Like, what's the backstory to that?
Why am I collecting pieces of cardboard with men in their underwear on them?
Yeah, when in reality, like, this is probably worth, but because we put value towards it.
Right.
So like all these thoughtful questions, and I think you get them from all these podcasts. And sometimes, like, Rob says it on his podcast, if it don't apply, let it fly. So like, you can be listening, but I still enjoy listening to like a person like Rob or someone like that. And you're right, there's other avenues too. Like, I'm a huge podcast listener, so I'm always listening to I like listening to Road Dogg's podcast
Yeah.
because it just tickles me in the right way. The
Yeah.
Southern humor and everything. Some of his jokes that he makes, I love the lines that he like.
Yep.
He looks like a glazed ham dropped in a barbershop. Like some of these things, they just catch you in the right way, right? It fills you
Right.
with joy and stuff. Same with like Card Foundation podcast. I feel like that they bring out the fun, like excitement of ripping and tearing and collecting and cheerleading and hooting and hollering everyone's collections and like that.
They have developed into their own characters within
Right.
the show.
Sure. Yeah. But they're not like they're not like party boys, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Well, maybe Danny, but they're not like
Yeah.
they're not like full party boys. It doesn't give off that like jerk vibe, right? They don't have the jerk vibe going
Sure.
on. It's very much like how the Major Brothers too on their podcast. They feel like your buddies. Like all these people feel like your buddies. And I think it goes down to like what kind of shared values do we all unintentionally have, and are we all sharing with each other? I mean, when you record a podcast, you share a lot of yourself and what you think. You share a lot of your opinions all the time, right? So to I think someone like me, if I'm collecting wrestling cards for sentimental reasons, for a cool image of a moment in time, or I like this wrestler, when I look at this card, it makes me feel like, I'm there with my dad and my grandpa and my cousins around me when we're watching Bret Hart get screwed or something, like whatever. I think then we all have these similar values of like, we like this a little bit more. And I think these podcasts that I've been listening to extract that pretty easy. Another shout out to the Squared Circle Relics podcast too.
Yeah, that's once again, like you're bringing these points out that I hadn't really thought of. Like, I think there are different, like the same podcast you listen to might give you a business perspective, a different way to look at something, and then 5 minutes later make you realize why you love 87 Tops WWF so much. Like, that might not be worth anything. And
Sure.
And it's just what you said. Like everything you hit on is exactly why. Because I do like to collect, and I've got another PC which I haven't recorded the podcast on it yet, but I've got like a non-wrestling PC that I'm going to start doing, and I don't know how that's going to go over with us wrestling fans here, but I love listening because I have all these connections, like you said, and it's just interesting that to be able to take those, like I said, and put it towards producing content. Like I can take what someone else is producing content for, turn that same exact content into wrestling focused, put it on this channel, and it just helped out a whole bunch of other people that would never listen to that. So I took a mindset and put it into the wrestling card collectors that they would have never even known about otherwise. So
well, here's another wacky observation. And McGrath, right? The Wrath of McGrath, Brett McGrath from Stacking Slabs podcast. He has another podcast too, Modern Day Marketer with the Juice, right? And I'm a modern day marketer, so I started tapping into his podcast when I was like, what is this other podcast? I was like, oh, he's a marketer. And the same thing, if you listen to both podcasts, his content parallels each other. You can tell he's in a wavelength at it. Like you can tell that he's having the same deep thoughts about his collection as he is in his personal career, kind of these things. And I have a lot of the same kind of similar things going on with me too.
So 2 things I want to pull out specifically that you guys talked about on the Sports Card Therapist show. And guys, if you haven't already, what are you doing? Go follow. Rob's been on the show. Rob's been on the roundtables on the Worlds Collide. Go check out his YouTube channel and his podcast. Great stuff. And it's just kind of like what me and Graeme have been talking about. Like he'll talk wrestling, but he doesn't talk it like I do or like Card Foundation.
Right.
But there's other guests that he has, whether it's the vintage stuff, whether it's people who are just dealers. There's so much to learn at all of these platforms. So go check out Sports Card Therapist. But this specific episode, between the 3 of you, I'm going to exclude Rob from this because just talking about the 3 guests. 2 things that stood out. And the first one I want to talk about is all 3 of you guys were talking about connection and the reason you collect cardboard and the connection you have. So we'll start there. You've touched on it a little bit, but talk about why the connection is so important between moments and, again, why are we collecting these pieces of cardboard?
I guess maybe to put it in a weird, wacky Netflix modern way. Remember the Mary Kondo show? Did you ever watch?
I don't know.
You never saw? Okay.
Mm-mm.
You know what? You don't seem like someone that would have watched the Mary Kondo clean up. So anyhow, the whole idea was you would, to tidy up your house or your space, you would basically pick up an object and you would look at it and you go, does this bring me joy? And I'm a pack rat for sure. Like when I look around like, I mean, this is arranged for this, right? When I look around my office, I'm like, there's too much junk in here. I got too much junk, but a lot of this junk is pretty important.
Mm-hmm.
Even the stuff, like if I pick it up, there's a lot of Magic books over there. If I pick each one up, I know what one each book represents in my Magic performance today,
Which is important.
which is important.
Even if it has no like immediate impact on you,
sure,
if it's part of a journey, it's pretty important.
yeah, it feels like it's like an important puzzle piece
Yep.
that is create. Like, I don't know, it's hard to let go of some of those things, and I think it's the same with the wrestling cards. Like you asked me to do this a couple days ago, and last night I pulled out all the boxes and I opened all the lids, and I went through all the cards and I did the reevaluation of like, let's look at all these cards again.
Yep.
And you get to see and I haven't done that in a while, right? And this is
Mhm.
now a year of collecting, when maybe if I look back a year ago there were 0 cards.
Right.
And now there's boxes and boxes, and it's a story that you've told
Yep.
through the collecting. Like, oh, I remember when I got, and if you don't really remember, then I'll just put that off to the side. That'll go to the card show, you know?
Yep. And that's another way to put it on
Yeah.
what you need to get rid of and what you need to keep. Like
Mhm.
if you pull it out and you haven't looked at it for a year, it still has that same impact to you. That's a keep.
And
And
cards
you just keep doing that.
and cards can have all sorts of different stories, right?
Mhm.
Like, I know I have some stuff that I got from Drake's PC, and that's exciting to own a piece of Drake's PC, right? Like,
Right. Exactly.
that's a little bit exciting. It's still an awesome card,
Right.
but it has that element to it too. Or I have this, I think one of the first cards I bought, like I didn't know anything about cards, right? And it was an in-person signed Bruce the Beefcake card, and I got it for like a couple bucks off eBay
Yeah. Why
from
not?
a local guy in town. But now I'm friends with Greg in town.
Gotcha.
And now I'm going to be setting up a table for the first time at Greg's show, his first show that he's running on the weekend. So like that card, now I can't get rid of it because it represents this start of this whole story.
Right. And the dollar amount is irrelevant because of what it represents.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything.
And that transitions into the next topic I wanted to talk about that you guys mentioned, low end cards. Like everybody on that show was all about low end cards. It's the first time that I've ever seen a panel or group of people so gung ho about low end cards. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I want to understand, like, I want to get your perspective. Maybe you can speak for everybody else on the panel since they weren't here. Like the importance of low end cards, why you continue to collect them, why everybody maybe still collects them. Because I've said it, I mean, you've probably heard me talk about it. Like every card out there has a home, and a lot of our headlines or the only thing that people want to talk about, whether it is Card Foundation, me, or sports card content, a lot of times those big hobby headline cards are the ones that get all the praise, right? And I think there are a lot of people that either just get into collecting or they've been collecting base sets for years, maybe, and they see all the stuff and they're like, well, you know, I don't have that card, so I don't matter in the grand scheme of things. My collection is worthless. I'm stupid because I don't have this, what everyone else has, which is completely wrong. And you guys put low-end cards up on a pedestal like nobody I've ever seen. So the floor is yours to talk about low-end, and hopefully you can represent everybody else on that panel.
It goes back to what I said, I think earlier. If you were to hold up the 2 cards, the one that's numbered and then the one that's a base card, what feelings do they give you and why, and what's important to you and what's important to your collection? I think low end collecting lets it lets you easily access so many cards and tell a story easily, create sets, create your own version of a set, right? Like I'm going to collect all the NWO people, just NWO talent, the original NWO though, none of this when we started adding too many members business.
Not when we had Wolfpack and then the silver NWO 2000 and the WWF version of NWO and Shawn Michaels.
Or even I started for a minute doing like cards of like couples, right? Like married couples now and things. And there's so many different things that you can do that, and especially with low end cards, and you can find low end inserts and just build a little cool insert set. And like, that's really dynamite. And then you can evaluate, like, look at that insert set. Like, do I want to spend well, no, maybe it's not important to me to spend more than $2 on a card. Right. What's important to me in my collection is that I have the cards here, and and I can look at them, and they're right here. You know, that's the important part. It's not that it's not that I have the lime green Ferrari on the street.
Right.
I don't care that I have the lime green Ferrari on the street. It's that I'm happy with my collection. I think that's what it comes down to. And then another parallel I remember in the episode I compared it to is that there's so many ways we're allowed to collect, and it's an expression through collecting is what we're doing too. And I know Michael Golden compared it to music, and I
Yes.
compared it to magic. And like magicians express themselves in different ways too. And there's birthday magicians, and this is the ego of the magician, and maybe this is the ego of the collector that I haven't realized yet or understood totally. And people might experience it, but birthday magicians struggle with like what am I doing with my life?
Right.
Like it's a weird situation being a birthday magician, but some people are really happy and kill it and love it and know exactly what the expectation is there, and that's their career and that's their life, and they can express themselves there. Then there's like restaurant magicians, tableside magicians, there's corporate magicians, there's, Vegas magicians, illusionists, escape artists. There's so many different ways you can go about doing it. But when you start to struggle and you feel stressed about what you have or what you're doing, maybe you're not expressing yourself right in the collecting, right? Like maybe like you're performing full on, maybe you're performing kid shows, but really you should be performing adult corporate shows. And I went through that evolution of my own career and found happiness again, right? And in what I was doing and stuff. So I think that's the same with collecting. Like, am I happy, crushing my bank account, getting high-end cards, right? That we as people have put a tag on a card that it's high end, but that's made up by us. So if we can accept that, like, do we need to crush the bank? I don't think so. But I mean, it's really up to you. It's how whatever. And I do both, right?
Same.
I'll do both. So I do collect the high level, the numbered cards, because I do if I'm like collecting Bianca Belair cards or Montez Ford cards, I do want to have some of the rarer cards in there. But then outside of that, if I'm collecting, like I have a ton of Roman Reigns cards that are just base cards because they're awesome.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like I in the last 48 hours, I bought a set of 8 Wrestling All-Stars signed that I did not have, and I know where they're from, and I know it's a good source. So they were raw, which I normally don't do that. And I spent like close to 4 figures on that.
Okay.
On the same token, I found a 2005 Upper Deck Disney card set in the binders, and I'm like, this is amazing, and it's a fraction of the cost. And I'm keeping my eye on that one. I may pull the trigger. So I know what you mean. Like it mixes all, and buying and selling too. Like I do a lot of $1.50 shipped cards, and like when I first got into this, I was like going out, what's the hottest rookie? Not because I wanted it, but because I wanted to sell that, make the money, and then go buy Hogan autographs or gold prisms or whatever it is that I want. And I found that over the course of just trying to buy and flip the high-end sports cards, I was actually stressing myself out just for the process. And then I found that, well, I can, wrestling fans love base cards. I can do all of these base cards, and my entry buy-in is so much less stressful. And then I switch my collecting too to kind of mirror that. Like, I just want to buy. I don't care whether it's a $2,000 card or a $2 card. I just want to buy what makes me happy and makes me have fun. And like what you said, kind of curate that experience. And it's just been that happened probably about 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. It's just completely changed my mindset on things. So I think we're on the same wavelength on that.
I think so too. And for me, and I know I think a lot of wrestling collectors, I've heard a lot of us have this goal is to reduce our collections a little bit.
A lot of people, yeah. I started out doing that, and now I'm doing just the opposite.
I think I'm doing the opposite too. Like I was like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that yet. So
and that's one of the great things about the hobby is we've got consolidation, you've got hoarders, and then you got people in the middle, which I think maybe both of us actually now, because I still have like my core stuff I'm collecting that I'm not gonna say I'll never sell, but it would be the last stuff I would sell. And that hasn't changed over the course of multiple years now. But then I keep saying like, oh, well, here's another pink PMG that would go good with my Hogan PMG. Or I want to start this Disney collection because I've just become such a fan of going to the parks. Like there's this weird stuff that starts like kind of creeping in.
So say a card pops up and you're like, oh, wow. How do you let it go?
How do I not buy it?
Yeah. How do you just let it go?
I look at the price. Because if it's something that it's just like, well, this is like under $50 and it's worth way more than that, either in general or it's worth way more than that to me, I just buy it. But if it's like over that $50 price point, I try to think, okay, at this moment or within the near future, is that $50 going to be, is there something out there that is All-Star related, Karrion Kross related, or ECW autograph related that $50 would go better to? If not, then I put it on the watch list and then, him and haw about it. But if there's something over there, I'm just like, nope, just focusing on, that $50 is going to be better put on buying out a collection to resell, or buying that, going towards that fund to buy other things. Because, a lot of people, Brett, we keep name dropping him. He talks about like going after the card and then figuring it out later. I very rarely do that. Most of the time, because I like to create the self-sufficient hobby. Most of the time I'm waiting, unless it's if I see some kind of rare cross card or an All-Stars card that never pops up, I'll jump on it and figure it out later. But more often than not, I'm so focused that I'm able to have those funds from just continuing have that activity of buying and selling, that it rarely happens.
I just try to lie to myself and say I didn't see it.
Whatever works. Yeah, whatever works. Everybody's got different ways of collecting and tactics. So
yeah,
a couple more questions and we'll get out of here. Where do you see the wrestling card, just on the community, the overall, like Panini's got the license for a couple years, then it goes to Fanatics. Like, so where do you see wrestling cards going moving forward? We're no longer the kind of person sitting in the corner, because card show dealers recognize us now as being, legitimate. So where do you see wrestling cards going overall? Again, you can take that wherever you want.
I think the community is going to continue to grow. We're going to see more and more product available to us too. I mean, AEW Upper Deck, but didn't really talk about that much too. But yeah, I have a bunch of that too. I think that's really cool to collect right now, because it's a brand new company. You're getting the very first series of cards. I think it's more important than what people have been expressing.
People said the same thing about the first Prism launches in sports too, and now look what happened with those. Like these sets that came out that had never been done before, and then all of a sudden years later. So I think you're on.
It could all. Who knows? Maybe Tony's printing these along with Impel. We don't know.
Oh, there's a new rumor.
Okay. But I can see the community continuing to grow. We'll see a lot more independent sets appear.
Yep.
So many different. I have a couple local wrestling buddies, and I produced some cards for them, just like on the side for them. So I think seeing that at indie shows, we're going to see wrestling cards grow. However, saying that, here's one of my Kreskin predictions. We're going to see the hobby community grow really big, swell up big. And then there's going to be this weird moment in time where everything seems to be like, what's happening all of a sudden? But it comes back down to like a core group that's bigger than it is right now. But it's something will.
Do you think that's from a collecting perspective or a price perspective or a product release perspective?
I think it's like a natural thing that happens with like a collecting perspective. Like as things get really exciting, a lot of people latch on, and then some people instantly like, oh, this wasn't for me. This wasn't for me. So that you see people fall out of it, but then at the same time, people still latch on in different ways. So I think it'll grow really big. I think we're still really growing fast and big right now. And then there's going to be a point when a lot of people sell out their collections. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff we can get for a great price. Some of it's happening now.
It's happening in sports right now for sure.
Sure. And not the same with wrestling cards. Wrestling cards is held strong.
Right.
But I think it's going to happen at a weird time, not related to sports cards at all, because there are different markets.
Right.
And I think that'll happen. But I think, it's going to be so cool. I can't wait to see like the better photography on Panini cards. My goodness.
It's just been night and day difference.
Yeah. I mean, some of the... Yeah, tops, it's fine. There's some cool stuff. There's some cool stuff in tops, but there's also just a lot of cardboard there that you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, unless you're a super collector or going after a specific parallel or chrome set or something, it's very, like, looking back at it, it's very like pick and choose. Kind of closing out, what is some words of wisdom that you have for the wrestling card community and collectors at whole? Maybe it's something you struggle with that could help them. Maybe it's something you see that maybe you think they should kind of latch on to. The floor is yours to kind of just give words of wisdom to the community.
Be curious. Always ask questions. Don't be shy. The community, I think we're all shy, but we're also really welcoming and inviting to everybody if you DM or message each other.
Right.
And cheerlead your fellow collectors. That's like the number one thing. I mean, like this podcast, your podcast, we mentioned so many other content creators and things like that. And like in other podcasts, people don't do that.
Yeah.
And so continue to do that, ask questions, support each other, get involved in the community too, however you want to do it, whether you want to get out to a card show or if that's too much. Online trades are super cool through the
Yep,
mail.
definitely.
Mailing cards, there's nothing more fun than mailing a card and getting a card in the mail. Like that is the best. It's so old school and awesome.
I agree.
But I would say that's all it is. Be curious, ask questions, and cheerlead people's collections.
Real quick, do you think, because I have, I don't think so. I don't think wrestling cards would be where they are now if it wasn't for community, social media, on like whether it's trades or just the interaction of, maybe you, me, Elspar, maybe we live in a community where there's not a lot of people you can just run out the door with and talk wrestling cards. But I feel like the online community has made you feel like you can reach out to anybody at any time, just talk about wrestling cards, buying, selling, trading, whatever it is.
Online community and this specific community too, like welcoming and nice and everything.
Right.
But for sure, I mean, if it didn't exist like this, like through all the avenues that people, I'm not on Twitter at all, but that's a whole nother realm of wrestling collectors, right? People are all over the place, but they're all still like, there's a central welcoming in the wrestling card community. So for instance, like I recorded 150 episodes of a Magic podcast, right? With magicians that have podcasts and things like that. I appeared on maybe one other magician's podcast, right? In this wrestling card community thing, and I've been involved in Magic for like 25 plus years. Wrestling card community a year, and in the past like 2 weeks, like Rob was kind enough to invite me on the podcast. You've been kind enough to invite me on the podcast and talk about my collection. It's hard to explain what that difference is. I think it's just called no ego, but that is what makes wrestling cards different.
Excellent. Let everybody know where they can find you. Anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
Yeah, so if you want to see my wrestling card collection, you can follow me on Instagram at Wrestling Card Wizard. You can see short clips of me doing magic tricks there. And hey, say if you have a company or a business and you want a virtual magic show that connects everybody, you can check out GraemeReedMagic.com. I've done some incredible things. Also, if you're to check, we're all wrestling fans here. Yes. All Ego Ethan Page. If you go to All Ego Ethan Page's YouTube channel, shameless plug here, and you were to look up virtual magician, you'll find me doing like most of my virtual magic show to All Ego Ethan Page in a full episode.
That's awesome. We just talked about not having an ego in the community to All Ego Ethan Page.
Sure. And as I shamelessly plug my magic show too. So you got to do it. You got to be him. You got to be him.
Got to do what you got to do. It's a wrestling business, right? I mean, we're not in it, but we're kind of like.
You got to get yourself over.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Graeme, thanks for coming on. Thanks for, having a great discussion with the community. And thank you guys all for watching. Make sure to go follow him. We'll put the link in the show notes to his Instagram. See you guys.
Amazing conversation. What do you guys think? Do you think these interviews are getting better? I keep trying to get different guests that don't have platforms or we don't hear a lot about. And the more I do that, the more feedback I get that people are really enjoying this stuff. Even though I know they are a little bit longer format. Some people like that, some people don't. Again, if you don't like the longer formats, just watch it in pieces. That's okay. But Graeme and I discussed a lot of different topics today, and I'm hoping there's something in there that you heard or you liked or disliked. Whatever it was, I'm hoping there's something in there that can affect the way you collect or change your mindset or maybe justify something you're doing or the way that you're doing something. As I said, I just continue to want to try to use my platform, which isn't very big, I know, but I want to use this channel or my podcast or social media, whatever it is, to promote others. I think there's a lot of people in the hobby that have great collections, great ways about going about things, but they don't have huge platforms. So if I get the opportunity, like Graeme today, I wanted to bring him on. Make sure to give him a follow on Instagram. I put the link in the show notes to his account. And let him know that you enjoyed his discussion and his appearance today on the Wrestling with Cards YouTube channel. And if you've got any questions about wrestling cards or, hey, magic, reach out to him on Instagram, like I said. And while you're in the show notes checking out the link to his Instagram account, make sure to check out all the other links below to all of the ways that you can help show your support for my content. Patreon, social media links, links to the podcasts, and much more. If you enjoyed today's video and you like what I'm doing, hit that subscribe button, give me a like, and spread the word. Tell somebody that you know that likes wrestling or sports cards or collectibles of any kind. Tell them about the Wrestling with Cards YouTube channel. But until next time, click on the videos on the screen for more great content. We'll see you there.